Okay.
Hi everybody, I think we're live on Facebook. We playing catch up sometimes with knowing when we're live or when we're not live, and yeah, so welcome to Inside Times, coming to you live from Kids Hurt 2 Hawaii. Oh, we need to put our phones on silent because we're getting notifications that we've gone live. Okay, so welcome back and thank you for joining us today. Inside Times is an educational program on Facebook Live for Kids Hurt 2 Hawaii. We were wanting to share information about grief and trauma because, first of all, that's what we do at Kids Hurt 2 Hawaii for children, is we give them an opportunity to process their grief and their trauma through peer support, through mentoring, through individual work. I mean, right now we're doing a lot of individual work because of the pandemic. So usually we do group work because group is really the most effective way for processing the pain of loss and trauma. Um, last time we talked about purpose in pain, and the idea that our pain is trying to give us information. It has a purpose. It has it is pushing us to grow, to expand, to develop our wholeness. And so the pain is relieved through that growth and development. And then I got to thinking about how, um, I didn't want people to think that that's the most important part. It is important, but you can't jump to it. You have to process the pain. You can't just go from hurting to growing and developing and expanding your consciousness. We have to focus on the experience first. The experience, when we focus on the experience, we go more deeply into it, if you will, then the pain might be a little bit harder because we're becoming aware through it. Um, but also it will guide us into understanding more deeply why that is coming up in the moment right now. So the thing I wanted to invite our viewers to remember is to focus on the experience first. We can only grieve or process trauma in the moment, in the here and now, because it's in our bodies. It's not in the past, it's in us, here and now. And so it can only be healed or processed in the now, in the moment. And so when the pain of that loss or that trauma comes up in that moment, then focus on that. Focus on the experience. If you're a support person for somebody who's grieving or traumatized, then allow them that space to have their experience. Sometimes it may sound like they're repeating themselves over and over and over again because it's so important to process the experience. But if you really pay attention very closely, you'll see that there are elements in that story that have changed over time. The pain may appear to be the same, but the story evolves. And we don't always realize that because we're not paying attention to those details in the story. We probably don't even remember what the story was last time. We only remember the parts that are familiar. So if you're a support person, it's really key, if I will, that you allow the griever or the traumatized person to process their pain through, if they're willing to talk and if they can talk, because talking is hard, then give them that space. Don't try to push them to uh, finding the purpose in it. Don't push them to understanding it. Oddly, experience has a way of just wanting to be recognized, acknowledged, validated. It's okay to be hurting. It's okay to feel sad. It's okay to be angry.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay to have any feelings that you're having whatsoever. It's okay to be in pain over the loss or the trauma. That makes sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
So having that validation for that momentary experience is really key to giving the person the opening to going more deeply into how it's affecting them in their own growth or changing them
The moment.
in that moment. And yes, you may come to a resolution in that moment. Doesn't mean that grief or pain from trauma is finished. Okay? In that moment, it may have come to a resolution, to a clarification. Doesn't mean that you're over it or you're done. A lot of people have a tendency to think that you need to get over it, but it's in your body. You can't get over what's in your body.
Mm-hmm.
It's part of your own. It's part of your identity. It's part of your physical being.
Need to live with, experience,
Yeah.
to learn how to live with it.
Yes, you have to learn how to live with it. And as you learn to live with it, you will also learn from it. So that, it's my concern was, because I see this a lot, is that based on what I said last time, people would be pushing themselves or pushing others to, you need to just, find the purpose in this pain. And I didn't want that to be the only focus. And I wanted people to be able to process their experience in the way that they need to. We all grieve in different ways. We all process pain in different ways. We're affected by trauma in different ways, and what it means to us can be different. And so really focus on those differences, really take them seriously, value them. Those differences are about our differences. We're all different in this world. And our grief and our trauma processes are going to be as unique as we are.
Right?
What do you think? Yeah?
Right. So, when we work with children, online at
Uh-huh.
this moment, it has to be always that moment.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, we ask them,
Mm-hmm.
who died and how the person died, and
Mhm.
who did you separate from.
Yeah.
That happened in the past,
Yeah,
But, the things they experience is that moment.
yeah. And we just give them the space to name the loss, because sometimes naming it is the step you have to take to go into the pain of it.
Mhm.
But the nice thing about children is they are in the moment, they live in the moment, they grow in the moment, they are, they exist in the moment. And they've really forced me to learn from them and recognize that their grief is in the moment. And, they may not be grieving, or because grief is a potential.
Mhm.
It's a potential in your body, and it's not always active. Sometimes it's inactive, sometimes it's active, but it is a potential for change, grief itself. Trauma, on the other hand, it damages the body in terms of changing how we function and leaving us in a state of perpetual fear and anxiety. So that has to be healed. But again, children know that it's in the moment. So they will choose what they need to work on in that moment in time, when they name that loss, or they name that trauma. That's a huge step. We don't make them talk. We have an IPASS rule, because talking is huge.
Right.
Naming it is huge. When children pass, I understand. Yeah, that's hard to say. And when they do share, I'm awed because, yeah, that's hard to say. And so we don't force them to do anything. We allow them that space and provide them with a safety net, and surround them with safety.
I mean, I see a lot of children get frustrated, like kind of irritated or sometimes cry in a group, but not because of their the trauma or loss, something else.
Yeah.
It's sort of,
Right.
because it's maybe something to do with it, but just different things, frustrated,
Right.
like,
But they're more
angry.
vulnerable to feeling
Right.
frustrated or
Mhm.
hurt by other things because their grief is active
Mhm.
or their trauma is
We activate, energy.
active.
So,
There's
right.
so yeah. So they're more vulnerable to that, not just in our program. Let me be clear, they're more vulnerable to being upset or frustrated by things happening in the moment because their grief energy is active or their trauma is active. What I mean by that is that their nerve is active, and they usually come in with that active lower nerve. The lower parts of their nerve are active. Um, and what we provide in terms of calming is is that it helps the nerve calm, and that allows them to focus on what they need to do in their healing process. But they are more vulnerable to getting frustrated and hurt and cry. So they have a lot of owies. You can barely touch them, and they're like, ow, it hurts, and you don't see anything, but you know that that's an indication or symbolic representation of their pain. And so we get the ice out. Do you need a Band-Aid? There's no cut, there's no bleeding, but those Band-Aids really work. And the ice, we go through a lot of Band-Aids. Band-Aids are expensive, but that's okay because you can't put a price on healing. We pay anything it costs for healing, and so those Band-Aids are worth every bit, every penny. And ice is a very powerful tool. Now, giving children that kind of comfort and supporting them even when we don't see a problem, it doesn't matter. The problem is they're in pain and they're showing us symbolically through their frustrations. So it may not be that another child took their cookie. It might, but that's got them in total despair over losing that cookie. That's symbolic. It's not about the cookie. And if we focus on the cookie, we're going to lose understanding of what they're really dealing with and going through. So we have to remember that as a
Cookie?
support person.
Oh.
It's not about the cookie. It looks like it's about the cookie, but it's not about the cookie. So it's important to recognize that children often express themselves in ways that doesn't in ways that makes it hard to see their grief or their trauma, because if we focus on the content, if we focus on that the content of what they're saying or what's happening, like the cookie, then we're going to miss that they need our support and our comfort, and they need healing in that moment. So we at Kids Hurt Too are very sensitive to that, and our program is designed for that kind of response.
So now it's, as you know, it's under the pandemic, and even Hawaii, lockdown got lifted up. Numbers still there. Children has to stay home and cannot go out, eat. So children are very, easy to get frustrated.
Yeah.
Easy to get mad. Easy to
Have a
get
lot of
cry.
pent up.
Right. So that's how that the parents can. Basically the same thing, just like
Yeah.
indulge,
Right.
not indulge. I don't
Well,
know.
it's kind of like indulging,
Yeah.
because I think a lot of people think of it as indulging. It's, so fine. If that's what you need to think of it as indulging, then do it. Indulge your children. Just remember that by indulging them, you're providing comfort. And, our tendency is to say, stop crying.
Right.
That's not a big deal. Why are you so upset?
Everybody's experiencing.
Yeah, so if we can refrain from judging their emotions or their upsetness or their tears, judging them as if there's something wrong with them or judging it as if it's not appropriate, if we can refrain from doing that and just recognize that they're crying, they're hurting, they're angry, there's a problem, they need comfort, and just hear them out and be with them in that moment and acknowledge. So joining is the skill that we've talked about in our previous episodes when we're talking about how to work with grieving children. Joining is a skill that we use. So joining would look like, oh, you're crying, you're upset, it looks like this was really hard for you. I see your tears. I see you're stomping. I see you've thrown yourself on the floor and you're kicking and screaming. Wow, that's really loud. Just being there and in a matter-of-fact way and just saying what you see, saying what you hear, and matching the energy. Maybe parents feel like throwing themselves on the floor and kicking and screaming. So join them. Get in there. Have some of that fun. Of course, it's not, children aren't doing it for fun.
For fun, yeah.
But we do it for fun. The adults are doing it for fun. Keep that in mind, because you don't want to
mock them. You don't want to mock the
you don't
kids.
want to mock
Yeah, you don't want to
them.
mock the kids.
Yeah, you don't want to mock them. You
Makes
don't want
things,
to make fun
kind
of them.
Yeah, worse.
You don't want, sometimes we treat children like little adults, and they're not adults. They don't have the capacity to understand what is happening inside of their bodies like adults do. And so they often need our help in understanding what's happening inside their body. You're hurting, you're upset, you look angry. You might not be angry, but you look angry, and to really try to be present with them and realize this is the moment. This doesn't define who they are. It's not all of who they are. It's just a momentary experience that they're expressing, and trusting us with that experience. And children will do behaviors more with their parents because that's who they trust. That's who the most, and that's who they are counting on for support and comfort. And so they're going to show parents those inner struggles more openly than, let's say, their friends or their friends' family, because parents will say, why are they so good for them and not for me? Well, that's why. That's one of the reasons why. Because they trust that you can support them and will support them and will comfort them when they're feeling pain of some kind. Physical pain, there's no doubt. They broke a leg, you'd be there. You'd be like, let's get you to the hospital. If they had a stomach ache, you'd be there. Let's get you some tummy medicine. There's a lot of ways that we respond to physical pain that we could do well with by responding to the emotional pain in a very similar way. Unconditionally. We don't blame children when they have a stomach ache. We don't blame them when they bust their toe. That's the one that I had the problem with when I bust my toe.
Duke always step on your foot.
Oh my gosh. And, to just say, oh, that looks like it's so painful, it hurts, and to comfort them. And it's the same with emotional pain. The difficult part with emotional and mental pain, can't see it. You can't understand the cause. Because, maybe the cause was in the past. And often it is. But the pain is here now. The pain is in the present. So it doesn't matter that it was in the past. It doesn't matter how long ago it was in the past. The pain is here now, and it's with us and grows as we grow. And so being present with the experience, allowing children to, or other grievers, to process the pain before we invite them to go deeper and to understand how that pain might be helping them grow in some way or bringing them into a new awareness, exploring it more. And it will naturally reveal itself. That's the interesting part. A lot of times if we push past the pain and try to get to the information, then the pain comes back later in the same exact way, and it repeats, and it cycles because it hasn't been heard, it hasn't been fully processed and explored. So I wanted to encourage our viewers today to be open and accepting of the experience. You didn't put it on silent, did you? It's okay. Being open and accepting to the experience of grief and trauma that somebody may be expressing to you, if you're lucky enough, if you're trusted enough, that you can be open to that and allow them that space to feel those feelings. You know, if it frightens you, it's okay. Say, I feel scared. If you're concerned about their safety, then say that. I'm afraid for your safety. Especially when somebody expresses suicidal ideation.
Right.
A lot of times we want to say, oh, don't feel that way. Don't think like that. When that's not actually helpful. What's more helpful is saying, that frightens me. I'm afraid for your safety. Because I care. I don't want anything to happen to you. It's more comforting to a person if we stay in the moment too, if we're real with them. That is frightening. When I hear somebody say something that suggests they want to hurt themselves, that's my first response is, oh my, that's not good. I'm scared for you. We really have to do something because this is very dangerous. Where a lot of people say, you need to stop thinking like that. You don't have any reason to think that way. Or things that try to ignore or push it aside, or sometimes I think we're trying to make it better by saying those things because we are frightened. And so acknowledging that fear in ourselves is a real challenge.
So as a mother, if that young adult, expressing, I just, got myself, jump off from the building or whatever, that must be horrifying
Oh yeah.
for the mom.
Yeah, and
Don't know what to
I
say
think
and take it.
right, it is horrifying for mothers, and the first thing they want to say is, don't think like that. Stop thinking that way. Stop feeling that way. Just stop it, stop it, stop it. When what we need to be saying is, that's really scaring me. I'm as scared for you now as if you had been in a car accident, or as if you had broken your leg, and I really think we need to see a doctor, okay? Because
Right.
these are very scary ways of thinking, and we don't think that way. We don't think that we want to hurt ourselves unless there's something happening in our brains that suggests an illness or an imbalance in our brains. Okay, and usually imbalances are caused from illnesses or they're genetic. So we have to take them seriously. We have to be openly frightened and respond in the same way we would respond when we were openly frightened about any other illness our child might have. I think we're all sitting in a state of anxiety and fear with the pandemic. And we're trying to be brave, and we're trying to be tough. We're trying to get through it and be strong. And as adults, it makes it even harder for us to be sensitive to our children's fears and our children's struggles because we're struggling and trying to get through it and handle our fears. And so it's harder in families. And so we really want to reach out to everyone and say, please know that Kids Hurt Too is here. We are ready to support you. We've been doing this for 20 years and we're really good at it.
But some kids are like a young adult and still having a difficult time, and you know,
right.
but some of them think, you know, oh, maybe we're an adult, he's in no more young children,
Right.
so you know, we're not gonna
even
seek
harder.
that.
Because young
services.
adults, you can't make them get help.
Right.
You know,
Unless he or she wants to get help.
Right.
But usually that's
usually
not the case.
Usually when our brains aren't working properly, we don't recognize that we need medical intervention or help. We don't realize it because our brains aren't working properly. So it's really hard. Yes, the brain is the organ of thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. And if the brain isn't healthy, then those things aren't going to be healthy either, which is why it's super hard for young adults 18 and up, who are at the highest risk, by the way, for suicide, because we can't make them get help. And our society in general is grief denying, suicidal denying. You know, we don't want to, it's stigmatized. We don't want to address it. We label people, you know, so young people, they don't want to deal with that. So really, really understand that.
Especially like children and youth whose family member, you know, friends and die from suicide. The risk of them,
higher.
You know.
It's higher.
Yeah, very high.
Because of the behavioral modeling and also because of possible genetic components. Genetic components lead to susceptibility to chemical imbalances. So in a stressful time like this, if you're susceptible, like I'm susceptible to anxiety and depression because of my childhood trauma. So during this time, I've really had to struggle with calming myself down, being grateful and having gratitude, and
using the breathing,
and using my breath. Sorry about that. That was our neighborhood bus. Yay, the bus. Yeah, so yes, so I know the struggle in myself and I understand it, and I'm lucky because I get support from you and you're able to recognize it and provide that comfort and not criticize or, you know, or judge me. So that helps a lot.
Vice versa.
If my brain wasn't working right, it could be dangerous for him. But then it would be hard because, you know, it's hard for adults to hear that they need to get some kind of support.
Humor helps.
Humor does help. Watch funny shows.
Yeah,
you can affect your own brain chemistry by watching funny shows and laughing and breathing and yoga and eating right, eating healthy, staying away from sugar. And, you know, those are things that we can do to change our chemical imbalance, but young adults aren't really open to that either. So
I think that's why a lot of people going surfing now.
That would be good.
It's helpful.
If more people went surfing. So
that's the only thing we could do, you know.
Yeah, that's what you do.
Yeah. I mean, no, you know, people couldn't go to the, you know, like, you know, even hiking or couldn't go to the even, but now we can. So
some kind of physical activity and all those things can affect our brain chemistry in a positive way. Just like
in the nature.
Yeah.
Helps.
So, in conclusion, we're going to end today at 30 minutes. It's not useful or compassionate to push through or aside the experience like feelings or thoughts or actions or memories or sensations in your body. Others and you want grief to end or for you to feel better, but grief is not about feeling better. It's not for feeling better. It is for adapting, connecting, and opening you to your life's purpose. First, you got to go into it to come out of it. first you gotta acknowledge it, validate the experience in the moment before that information will reveal itself and you can even receive that information. So remember, focus on the experience, take the time, and be a good listener to those who need support.
Just be there for the person. That's hard though. Now we cannot, right?
You can virtually, within your home, you can, by telephone, you can. I mean, find those ways that you can be there for them. So thank you for being here for us and listening today. We appreciate all of you. Please donate to Kids Are to Hawaii to help us continue this work, and we look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks. Aloha.
In 2 weeks. I said, aloha.